Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Indian troops have martyred 3 more Kashmiris in occupied Kashmir's Shopian district. The youths were targeted during a cordoned and search operation in the Sugan area of the district. The occupied valley has been under India's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the last 429 days. In Afghanistan, at least 3 civilians have been killed when their vehicle hit a roadside blast in the northeastern Kapisa province. A police spokesman accused the Taliban of planting the mine. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the blast. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict can turn into a regional war. In a cabinet session, Rouhani said Iran cannot tolerate the shelling on its soil by the warring side. Earlier, Azerbaijan said talks with Armenia are useless unless it changes its stance on the Nagorno-Karabakh region. India has recorded 986 COVID-19 deaths and over 72,000 infections overnight, taking the caseload to over 6.7 million. In Pakistan, 12 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 overnight, taking the death toll to 6,535. Globally, COVID-19 has claimed over 1,047,000 lives and infected more than 35.6 million. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Indian troops have martyred 3 more Kashmiris in occupied Kashmir's Shopian district. The youths were targeted during a military operation in the Sugan area of the district. The occupation troops have continued their cordon and search operations in several other areas of the territory. Yesterday, guards of a worker of the ruling BJP martyred a Kashmiri youth in indiscriminate firing in Gandarbal area. The occupied valley has been under India's curfew and communications blackout for the last 429 days. Meanwhile, Pakistan's envoy to the UN, Munir Akram, says the Indian government is spreading Islamophobia as a state policy. Akram made these remarks while addressing the 6th Committee of the UN General Assembly in New York. He said India cannot suppress Kashmir's struggle for freedom on the pretext of terrorism. Akram said terrorism cannot be linked with any religion under UN resolutions. The envoy said Indian forces are perpetrating gross human rights violations in the occupied valley. He added New Delhi is responsible for the killing of innocent Kashmiris in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Now, Pakistan has told a UN panel Hong Kong affairs are China's internal matters. Pakistan's envoy Munir Akram underscores the importance of non-interference in the domestic affairs of sovereign states. Akram spoke at the General Assembly's 3rd Committee on behalf of 55 countries. The envoy said legislative power on national security in any country rests with the state. He said the enactment of the law of China on safeguarding national security in Hong Kong is a legitimate measure. Akram said law ensures one country, 2 systems goes steady. He said Hong Kong residents can exercise their rights and freedoms better in a safe environment. Beijing has slammed U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's accusation against China during his visit to Japan. Earlier, Pompeo strongly criticized Beijing over the East and South China Seas, cybersecurity and China-India conflict. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Japan said Washington needs to abandon its Cold War mentality. Calling the allegations lies, the spokesperson accused Pompeo of maliciously creating political confrontation. He said China has always advocated multilateral cooperation, openness, tolerance and transparency. Now, at least 3 civilians have been killed when their vehicle hit a roadside mine in the northeastern Kapisa province. A police spokesman said the incident took place in the Dagab district. The police spokesman accused the Taliban of planting the mine. However, no group has yet claimed responsibility for the blast. Earlier, 2 suicide bombers attacked Afghanistan's National Army camp in the GUITARIST district of the Helmand province. The Defense Ministry said 3 soldiers were wounded in the attack. Azerbaijan says talks with Armenia are useless unless it changes its stance on the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Azeri envoy to Russia Polat Bulbuloglu's statement came after Armenia offered concessions over the Karabakh region. Bulbuloglu said engaging in dialogue is useless when Armenian forces are spreading hostilities to new areas. He added Armenia is in clear violation of international laws by provocatively attacking civilian population. Earlier, Azerbaijan said it liberated 3 more villages and several strategic heights from Armenia during the fighting. Meanwhile, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict can turn into a regional war. In a cabinet session, Rouhani said he has held talks with the Armenian and Azeri officials on the issue. Rouhani said the significance of protecting Iran's security was discussed with both sides. He said Iran cannot tolerate the shelling on its soil by the warring sides. The Iranian president added sending terrorists from Syria and other places near its borders is unacceptable. While in a televised address, Rouhani said Iran hopes to restore stability to the region in a peaceful way. He said nothing can be resolved by conflict and bloodshed. Meanwhile, Turkey says the European Court of Human Rights at the request of Armenia lacks legal basis. The ECHR called upon Turkey and other countries to refrain from violating human rights in the Azerbaijan-Armenian conflict. Ankara criticized the court's decision of taking interim measures against Turkey. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hami Aksoy said ECHR's move damages the court's credibility. Aksoy said the court did not consult with the Turkish government. He said the European Court took decision being unaware of the realities on the ground. Also, Turkey has criticized the European Union's 2020 enlargement package prepared for candidates and potential candidates. Earlier, a European Commission report said Turkey's chances of getting EU membership have been declining. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said the report reflects the EU's biased approach. It said Turkey, as a candidate, adopts the negotiation process despite being blocked by some EU parties' narrow-minded attitude. The ministry said the unfair criticism on Turkey's policies shows the European Union is far from being objective. It said the report depicts Brussels' double standards as it does not mention its own unfulfilled responsibilities. Now, Russia and China have expressed concern over political unrest in Kyrgyzstan and hoped for a swift return to stability. In an interview, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow hopes everything will be settled peacefully. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry said Beijing expects all parties involved can resolve their issues through dialogue. Spokeswoman Hua Chunying said China supports the policies its neighbors take to safeguard its independence, security and sovereignty. Kyrgyzstan faces chaos as rival opposition factions made grabs for power a day after they forced the prime minister to resign, while President Soronbay Jeenbekov has called for all-party talks. Now moving to Libya, where the rival factions have reached an agreement over the selection criteria for key sovereign positions. The delegations of the Libyan Supreme Council of State and the Tobruk-based House of Representatives signed the deal. The signing ceremony took place in Morocco following the second round of talks. The recent deal is related to the earlier 2015 Shkirat agreement. It dictates the approval of 2/3 of the House of Representatives for the leadership appointments. Previously, most of the sovereign institutions were divided with 2 chiefs. Now, Yemen coalition says it has destroyed an explosive-laden drone fired by the Houthis. It said the aerial vehicle was aimed at Saudi Arabia city of Najran. In a statement, coalition spokesman Colonel Turki Al-Malki said rebels continue to systematically target civilians. He said the coalition will implement operational measures to protect civilians in accordance with international law. The Houthi group is yet to comment on the claim. Now, the death toll from a blast in Syria's northwestern town of Al-Bab has risen to 21. The local administration said at least 118 were injured in the explosion near a bus station. Locals say the blast occurred when a bomb-laden vehicle blew up in a crowded area in the town. No one has claimed responsibility for the bombing. In March last year, Turkey and Russia agreed to a ceasefire in Syria, but the development failed to restore peace in the country. Syria has been mired in the civil war since 2012. Now moving to Bangladesh, where 4 Rohingya Muslims have been killed and dozens injured in a feud between 2 factions in the Cox's Bazar refugee shelter center. The Office of Refugee Relief and Repatriation Commissioner said 7 Rohingya have been killed and hundreds have been displaced in 3 days of clashes. It said before the deadly clashes, law enforcement arrested 9 Rohingya on different criminal charges. It added the army, anti-terrorism units and police are trying to bring the situation under control. A camp in charge said due to fears of clashes, 500 Rohingya families have been transferred to other shelters. The official added the families can return to their homes once the situation becomes normal. Now, Kuwait's new Emir, Sheikh Nawaf Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah, has named Sheikh Mishal Al-Hamad Al-Jaber as the new crown prince. State media said Sheikh Mishal is the deputy chief of the Kuwait's National Guard and brother of the late Emir, who died last week. Kuwait's National Parliament must approve the Emir's choice of crown prince before its term ends tomorrow. Last week, late Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah died in the United States, where he had been undergoing treatment since July. The Gulf state is observing a 40-day period of national mourning. It's time for a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, India has recorded 986 COVID-19 deaths and over 72,000 infections overnight, taking caseload to over 6.7 million. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1,047,000 lives and infected more than 35.6 million people. More details in this report.
With the second wave of the virus stalling hopes of any economic revival, the IMF has once again warned of an absolute crash of the global economy. In Latin America, Brazil registers the highest daily new cases in almost a month, while Argentina has reported the world's highest rate of positive cases. In the United States, the virus is spreading further among President Donald Trump contacts, as over a dozen of his top aides contract the virus. Over in Asia, COVID-19 continues to overwhelm already devastated India. Wastelands in India are being cleared to add space for graves in the capital's oldest cemetery.
The land that was allotted to us in this graveyard, all of that land has been filled up. After a meeting with the authorities yesterday, we were allocated some more land. So this machine is here to clean up that patch of land and create some fresh space.
Over in Europe, Spain has become the first Western European nation to surpass 800,000 total coronavirus cases, as Finland registered the highest number of infections in the last 24 hours. Holland has recorded the highest number of deaths. The World Health Organization says pandemic fatigue is raising levels of apathy.
We think that this is a forgotten aspect of COVID, in a sense that part of the challenges that we face is that this is an underfunded area historically. So when something like the current pandemic happens, we see the impact maybe heavier in this area because of the past situation.
Meanwhile, Russia's daily tally of cases rose to its highest since May. The Kremlin has imposed fresh restrictions in the capital city of Moscow.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 12 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 overnight, raising the toll to 6,535. The Health Ministry says 624 people tested positive in the last 24 hours. The ministry said there are 8,528 total active cases in the country. It said out of over 316,000 cases, more than 301,000 have recovered so far. The ministry added over 138,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while over 100,000 have been reported in Punjab so far. The National Command and Operations Centre says 79 people across the country are on ventilators. U.S. President Donald Trump says he has ordered declassification of all documents related to Russia and Hillary Clinton. The order covers the documents related to federal investigations in Russian election interference. They also include former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private server for government emails. President Trump said Americans have acted very slowly while it is perhaps the biggest political crime in the U.S. history. Last year, Trump gave Attorney General Bill Barr authority to declassify any documents related to surveillance of his campaign in 2016. Also, Facebook and Twitter have taken down posts from U.S. President Donald Trump for violating their rules. In a tweet, Trump suggested COVID-19 was just like the flu. Facebook took the post down, but not before it was shared about 26,000 times. A spokesperson for Facebook said they remove incorrect information about the severity of COVID-19. Twitter also disabled retweets on a similar post from Trump. It added a warning label that said the tweet broke its rules. Earlier, Trump told Americans not to fear COVID-19 as he returned to the White House after a 3-night stay in the hospital. Now, Poland's anti-monopoly watchdog says it has imposed a fine of $7.6 billion on Russia's Gazprom. The Competition and Consumer Protection says Gazprom did not get its approval for building the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Watchdog's president Tomasz Krosny says they have imposed penalties on 6 companies. It says the evidence leaves no doubt the entrepreneurs have deliberately violated the law. Krosny said it is not a fight with any entrepreneur. He says the fight is for respect for competition law and consequently for consumer rights. Nord Stream 2 is led by Gazprom. The US has also imposed sanctions on companies laying pipes for the project. Now, moving on, Germany says it will discuss with partners what action to take against Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny's poisoning. The global chemicals watchdog has confirmed Navalny was poisoned with a nerve agent in the Novichok family. A spokesperson for Berlin said Germany will discuss next steps in the Executive Council of Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. He said any use of chemical weapons is a serious matter and cannot remain without consequences. Earlier, Navalny said Russian agencies poisoned him as a threat ahead of next year's parliamentary elections. The Kremlin denies any role in the poisoning of Navalny. Now, Argentines protest in Buenos Aires against the International Monetary Fund to instigate talks for a new financing agreement. A $57 billion financing deal with Buenos Aires is up for negotiations. The protesters played drums outside the central bank building. People held placards reading IMF out. A mission from the IMF has arrived in the country to meet with officials from the Economy Ministry and Central Bank. A few weeks ago, Argentina completed a process of restructuring its debt to private creditors for $100 billion. Argentina is headed for an economic contraction of about 12% this year. The country remains stricken with economic recession for the 3rd year in a row. Now, the governments of Mexico and Cuba say they have made all preparations ahead of the arrival of Hurricane Delta. It will make a landfall as an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says the Hurricane Delta is continuing to rapidly strengthen. It says the hurricane is bringing maximum winds of 130 miles per hour with water level rising by 9 feet. Local officials have ordered evacuations from the hotels of Mexican resort of Cancun. The Mexican government issued a hurricane warning from Tulum to Zilam towns. Now, a desert sculpture museum in northwest China has become a hot travel spot during the National Day holiday. The museum is located in Suwu Desert Scenic Area in Gansu province. Details in this report.
China is on the move again as hundreds of millions of people are enjoying their National Day holiday. The country's first desert sculpture museum is attracting thousands of tourists. The museum covers an area of about 70 hectares with a total investment of about 120 million yuan. At present, the museum is home to 102 sculptures featuring modern and contemporary elements. Standing in the vast desert, the sculptures show a strong artistic appeal and visual impact. Tourists from across China have thronged to see the Desert Museum. Minchin County had held several international desert sculpture creation camps and invited domestic and foreign artists to create sculptures.
Eddie Van Halen, one of rock music's greatest guitar players, has died of cancer at the age of 65. The US musician's death was announced on Twitter by his son. Eddie and his brother Alex formed the band Van Halen in 1970s with singer David Lee Roth and bassist Michael Anthony. The band released its eponymous debut album in 1978, shooting to number 19 on the Billboard chart. Halen and his brother remained constant, appearing on 12 studio albums, selling tens of millions of copies. Van Halen became one of the biggest rock acts with hit superstars. Eddie Van Halen's pioneering virtuoso technique made him one of rock's top guitarists. Now in business stories, US aircraft maker Boeing has slashed its expectations for global passenger jet demand over the next decade by 11%. This shows an estimated $200 billion loss to the industry in revenue as airlines shrink fleets. Boeing has cut the demand forecast for the first time since the 2009 crisis. Boeing's Vice President Darren Holst said the pandemic has dramatically impacted the industry. He said it will take minimum of 5 years for the industry to recover. Holst said the cut takes the value of 10-year demand from $3.1 trillion to $2.9 trillion for over 18,000 jets. Meanwhile, Boeing expected nearly 60% of deliveries in the first decade will be for replacements. European stocks are trading mixed. Investors digest a robust round of earnings and President Trump's decision to hold talks about a second coronavirus stimulus deal. The pan-European stock 600 hovered just above the flat line. Britain's biggest supermarket chain, Tesco, gained over 2% as it reported a jump in sales. Frankfurt's DAX had 0.25%. Paris's CAC 40 dropped marginally. Italy's FTSE also dipped close to 0.25%. Earlier, Asian markets also traded mixed. Australia, Hong Kong and South Korean markets gained while Japan's dropped. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.